So continuing the work to replace the damaged diaphragm on the vacuum modulator. As you can see, last time I successfully welded on the original actuating Lucas arm with the washer. Little spot welds here, they're kind of ugly. I ground them down. I also filled it in with some two-part epoxy, this kind that you can get at the auto parts store. It's high strength, high temperature, resistant to fuel, so it was ideal. It's also grindable, ideal for putting on there to get a nice flat surface. The reason being, there's this original Lucas spring that sits against it. Actually, it sits like this. So it needed a nice flat surface. I thought briefly about using the spring that came with the American 454, and maybe even the housing instead of the Lucas housing, but I've come to realize, actually, that the way this works, the Lucas housing actually has a adjusting screw on the inside. And I thought it had something to do with working against the internal spring to kind of change the action of the spring. But it turns out it's really actually just a limiter. What this does, this little aluminum part in here, works to keep this long skinny spring straight as it goes into the housing here and it's compressed. But it also hits that screw head on the inside. So if you adjust your outside, the other end of the screw here, the screw head on the inside actually comes out. It does not work against the spring itself. It doesn't. The spring fits around that screw head. So I was mistaken in how I thought it was originally on these English alternators. You adjust that screw. It does not actually push against the spring. It just moves into the spring cavity, and it hits right there. It hits the top of this thing. So the idea is it's actually a limiter, a total vacuum advanced limitation adjustment, which is very clever. On a lot of cars, you want to get as much vacuum advance as you can. If, like, say you had it set up perfectly and it ran beautiful, you had a nice drive to work, but every day you go to work and you go up a steep hill, and that's when you hear a little bit of pinging. What you'd have to do on most cars is adjust the timing down a little bit. You kind of detune the car for the entire range of advance, and that'll solve your pinging problem, but you only had that problem going up a hill, on a high load. What you could do instead is leave the timing alone and come in here and adjust this a little bit and say, okay, I'm going to limit my high vacuum, high load adjustment here. It's not going to pull as hard because it's going to hit this stop here, because it's going to hit the screw head. So now you've just detuned it just for those high vacuum, high load conditions, which is brilliant. That's I think all cars should have that, and I didn't understand what that screw did before. Now that I've taken it apart, I actually have a much better understanding. It's a total vacuum limiter. It's not a spring adjustment at all. The other thing is to point out, this is a very thick piece of cast metal here, not very thick, but much thicker than the very thin sheet metal housing that came with the other half of this. You don't realize it until I ground it apart and had the two pieces to compare to. But anyway, I drilled a bunch of holes, 6 30-second screws, stainless steel, going into there. I figure 6 of them is enough. Little washers to spread out the force. We'll see how it goes.